So my 3D printer, I set it up so there's a line printed right here so the extruder is working correctly. And then based off of my software, I can monitor and see how the 3D print is gonna work. So what's gonna happen is the 3D printer is, if you start looking right here, just follow it. It makes a base, then it makes a bunch of lines, then it keeps going. And then if you go on here, then you see your layers. So then you have a thinner, more fine layer, and then it just keeps making fine layers for a little bit. Then it's gonna be making a bunch of squares, and then those squares start coming in, and then they start making a logo. And then you don't have the entire thing rising anymore. You just have certain parts of it rising, as you can see through the layers. And then this is your final finished product. And this is in a certain layer. And then if you go in X-ray, this is how it looks. It's just showing that the frame, and then you have your logo on the side of it. And then I can monitor based on the software, but this is pretty much just the logo I took, and I made it into 3D printing, and now I'm gonna print it. So this is my print. I just started around 20 minutes ago, and what I have is my extruder is just putting out the white lines. And if you look at the right before clip, this base is the thin base you saw at the bottom, which was the frame of it, and then it's printing. If you can look at a certain angle and you see that's burnt, which means that the extruder got too hot for the filament, so it burnt it. And then this is also rising, which isn't a good thing because then it's not going to make the print as stable. And unless you have a certain area that's enclosed, there's always going to be some flaw in printing it, but that's what you have to account for. And when making it, you try to make it not super complicated unless you have a controlled environment. But the printer usually adjusts to it, and it just keeps printing no matter what environment it is in. And this isn't super high, so it shouldn't really affect the print as much. And usually when you're using plastic filament, it adjusts because of cold, heat, so it's all gonna end up just fine at the end. And if you look right here, this was the line I was talking about. The extruder goes back and forth twice to make sure that it's extruding correctly, and then it goes over to the side and starts making the frame for the print, and then it's gonna keep printing. My bed is currently at 60 degrees, and then my nozzle is at 210, and it was at 225 before, and that's why there was brown here, because it burnt the plastic, but it didn't heat up the plastic enough to like just disintegrate it. And then I put it at a 0.4 speed. I can put it at a higher speed, but it's not going to look as accurate, and it won't look as good because the print could be intricate. If it's a super basic print, you can just do it at a normal speed, which is usually 1, which is what most printers are set at. But you don't really need to set it at 1. If you have time, you can make it less. And I always like to adjust my filament whenever I come down. I always like to make sure the printer has like room, because you don't want this small dial up here just pulling the filament and just barely doing it. So you try to make it a little loose, because then the the wheel has an easier time of feeding filament into the extruder, which means that it can print easier and not work this gear as much, because you will have to replace it eventually.
Here is the final product. What do you think? It took about, well, it tells you 11 hours and 15 minutes to print. See the edge and the actual printout, the height is maybe like half an inch. And then the details. Very, very cool. And you could paint it whatever color you want, because the filament is white, but you could print it whatever color you want. Okay, enjoy.